Hello and welcome back to KXAN Plus. Thanks so much for joining me here. And we are coming to you from our KXAN Plus studio with our Kristen's Classroom segment with KXAN meteorologist Kristen Currie. Kristen, thank you for joining me. How you doing?
Pretty good morning. We've got cooler temperatures. Hard to complain about that. Some real cold temperatures tonight. So I've been itching for that fall feel, and we finally get a little taste of that here within the next couple of days.
I know, and it really feels like fall when it's cold and you still see the sun out. So
Absolutely.
that's what has me in my fall era right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. Finally breaking out the sweatshirts and the big puffy coats, all of that happening. So I'm excited for it too.
Me too. But we're still talking about hurricane season
Mhm.
because hurricane season's not over yet. It's almost over, but not just yet.
Mhm.
And today we're going to talk about some of the records of hurricanes. What do you have for us?
Yeah, I figured we will talk about this today because there's been a lot of discussion about Hurricane Melissa being one of the strongest hurricanes on record. And yes, to a point, I think, there's no doubt Melissa will go into the record books, especially for that part of the Caribbean. But I wanted to take a look back at what are some of the current records here, especially because Noah's going to have to go through some data verification before Melissa officially gets in those record books. So I wanted to talk to you guys today a little bit about not only the records, but also, the different ways we categorize and measure strength of a hurricane. Because I often get asked, what's the worst hurricane ever? Well, it kind of depends on what you're looking at when it comes to storm surge or pressure or winds or, how fast it
Rain.
intensified, rainfall. There's all sorts of different ways we measure hurricanes. And there's actually different records for each, which I found very interesting too. So let's go ahead and dive in because we'll start first with pressure, the lowest central pressure. Typically, the lower the central pressure within that storm, the stronger the hurricane.
And what does the central pressure mean for anyone who doesn't really know what that means?
Yeah, basically, barometric pressure is the weight of a storm or the lack thereof. So the lower the pressure, the stronger the storm. You're looking at the inside the eye. You've got a very low pressure into the fact that as we measure these storms, the tighter the pressure gradient, the stronger the wind. So when you see a pressure drop, you're going to see a resulting uptick in wind speeds. And with the lowest central pressure, and oftentimes they're tough to measure because you're looking at, the middle of the storm.
And how do they measure this?
They'll do a couple different things. Hurricane hunters will fly through it. Or they'll use drop sondes, basically little instruments. And I say little because they're usually not that big. I mean, we're talking, about this tall. They'll drop that from the bottom of the hurricane hunter aircraft, and that will go all the way down through the eye wall, the part that surrounds the eye, the strongest part of a thunderstorm to measure winds and central pressures. Sometimes they'll drop it through the middle of the eye. But
And Melissa had a perfect eye, right? It was like right there. You could spot
scary,
it. Yeah.
scary when it comes to, the perfect circular eye wall that surrounds that eye. The more like almost fake it looks,
Yeah.
the stronger that storm is. Typically there's a little wobbly, there's a few vortices and stuff around it, but Melissa was definitely, and we'll talk more about her here in a second, but with the record of the lowest central pressure being 882 millibars. Again, low pressure, typically stormy, high pressure, typically clear and sunny. I mean, 882 is very impressive. This was Hurricane Wilma of 2005. That 882 central pressure was measured as Hurricane Wilma, which is the picture you see here, that moves straight through that Yucatan channel here. So the Yucatan is there on your left and Cuba is there on your right. These are all taken from space, so the NASA satellites that give us these views. But Hurricane Wilma had the lowest pressure of 882. Hurricane Gilbert in 1988 had 888 millibars. Labor Day 1935, 892, and then Melissa 2025 also had that 892. So that's
it was like neck and neck between
right.
those storms.
So given the unofficial data right now, Melissa would be tied for third as far as the lowest central millibar reading. So, like I said, the pressure readings defined I think meteorologically, that's what would be almost the default. If someone were to ask me, what's the strongest storm on record? I would say because of the central pressure, the lowest central pressure of Wilma being 882, this would be the most intense hurricane we've ever recorded. However, like I said, there's different facets of a hurricane. There's different meteorological factors. One of those being maximum wind speeds. If you look at the highest maximum wind speed we've ever recorded within a storm, that was Hurricane Allen I forgot to put it on here. It was 1980.
1980. Yeah, I just saw that.
1980. Hurricane Allen. And the reason I know that is because this one hit Texas. But
Really?
it had highest maximum wind speeds of 190. Now, it didn't make landfall with 190 mile per hour winds, but they measured 190 mile per hour winds within this storm. Again, you can see right there between the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. Now, there's some very warm waters there, which is why these storms intensify so quickly. We saw this with Melissa just this week in the Northern Caribbean with the warm waters and the low wind shear. But Hurricane Allen, 1980, 190 mile per hour winds, the strongest winds we've ever recorded within a hurricane. Those are maximum wind speeds. So there's certainly some higher wind gusts within these hurricanes, but I wrote down...
This one hit Brownsville, right?
Yes, this was down in the South Texas area. Dorian, Wilma, Labor Day, Gilbert, and Melissa all had maximum wind speeds measured of 185. So you're talking a 5 mile per hour difference between the strongest winds we've ever recorded in a hurricane and what just hit Jamaica yesterday.
Imagine just walking outside and you're in 190 mile per hour winds.
I know.
I don't even think anyone could walk in that.
No, yeah, there's no way. Like you would get lifted off your feet, toppled over for sure. And a lot of the times too with these hurricanes, those strongest winds are a little aloft or a little higher off the ground because once that wind does start to mix down, you get the friction from buildings and trees and everything that's down here on the surface where we live. But where they find oftentimes these maximum sustained winds is farther up in the storm, much farther up in the storm where there's not that land friction. But I just thought it was astounding. And I think you saw that reaction from meteorologists yesterday of if the fastest we've ever recorded is 190 in a hurricane, and we're talking about a storm with winds that are 5 miles per hour less making landfall. This is historic, right? Interesting to note that Hurricane Allen in 1980 was the strongest, but Dorian was 2019. This is the one that slammed into Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So very,
I remember that one.
obviously, similar in the Caribbean. Wilma, which we just talked about. Wilma was a Louisiana storm. And then Gilbert was also a Jamaica storm. Hurricane Gilbert in 1988 kind of sets the record of the worst storm ever to make landfall in Jamaica until yesterday, until Hurricane
And is there
Melissa.
a reason, like, is Jamaica, like, the perfect food for the storm, the water, the temperatures in the sky?
The Caribbean waters are very warm. The Gulf waters are also very warm. And that's basically food for hurricane is those warm waters. What really fed into Hurricane Melissa this week was the fact that this storm basically stalled over those warm waters. And so it had all the time in the world for it to further intensify. There was very little wind shear. Those winds that come at different speeds in different directions higher up in the atmosphere, very little of that working to destroy the storm. So it was kind of sitting in a perfect environment in the Northern Caribbean before it made landfall in Jamaica. Interesting to note that yesterday made landfall as that Category 5 storm, those 185 mile per hour winds. This morning, now that this storm is over Cuba, it's a Category 2 with 105 mile per hour winds. As of the latest update, the last one I saw was at 7 a.m. So, it can cut down and it can weaken pretty significantly once it gets over land. It's when it stalls over water that we get really concerned about. This one probably rings a bell, unfortunately, for all the wrong reasons. Hurricane Harvey, a historic storm, also a Texas storm.
Lots of rainfall.
Yep, and to this day, the wettest tropical cyclone to ever hit the United States. It was the highest rainfall total we ever got from a hurricane, and that was Harvey in 2017, August of 2017, where they recorded in and around near Houston 60.58 inches. Now, that was the peak. That was the highest I found. Most of those rainfall totals were between about 10 and 40 inches of rain, which is still insane, to think about. But the highest rainfall total out of Harvey, over 60 inches. So you're talking about pretty much 5 feet of rain there.
Was that in Rockport?
I want to say it was further
north.
Yes, along the coastline, because Rockport is where it made landfall, but it really started to slow down and almost wiggle over the Texas coastline a little further north, closer to the Houston area.
Yeah.
I want to see if I remember correctly, that 60.5 was a sensor that was just south and east of downtown Houston. But I mean, in the general vicinity, Southeast Texas, 60 inches of rain is a ton of rain. And like I said, you think of all the hurricanes we've got on record, records going back over 100 years. And this was the wettest one, the one with the most amount of rainfall. And then Hurricane Katrina.
This one was a very famous one.
Right. Yeah.
We learned about this in school. That's how famous it was.
For sure. When we talk about Hurricane Katrina, that almost kind of sets the precedent for worst storm just by human impact, right? Like you can have Hurricane Wilma with the central pressure being so low, Ellen with the highest winds.
Yeah.
But Katrina, in my opinion, as a meteorologist, was definitely one of those storms where you hope to never relive anything like that again because of the human suffering it caused. Just by the numbers, the highest storm surge is where Katrina sits in the record books. It was estimated storm surge between about 24 to 28 feet above ground, which is nuts. I mean, you're talking over 2-story buildings there.
Houses were gone.
For sure. And this was in Mississippi, the Mississippi coastline. If you've ever been out there, Louisiana coastline, Mississippi coastline, there's a lot of marshland right near the coastline. It's not like a beach like Texas, right? It's a little swampy, a little marshy where the roads don't go all the way out to where the ocean is, because of the swampland that acts as a buffer between the storm surge and land. So that's why it's estimated storm surge. But 24 to 28 feet is just insane. And that was attributed, to the hurricane. Then you talk about the fact that the levees break and that water funnels into a city like New Orleans that sits below sea level, right?
Yeah.
Water's going to try and find the path of least resistance to the lowest spot, lowest elevation.
And it needs to go somewhere.
Can't
just sit there.
And ideally, the levees were designed and built for that kind of situation of where the water comes down, they follow the levees out back into the Gulf. But when you have a breach in the levee or the levees fail, then all of that water is not going to go back to the Gulf. It's going to go to the lowest point. And again, that was the city of New Orleans in the 9th Ward. And I know, we've talked a lot about that.
That documentary that you told me to watch, I watched it, and it was a great documentary.
It's powerful.
So sad. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people remember Hurricane Katrina as, the Superdome and all of those who were left unhoused. So many, thousands and thousands of homes were left destroyed or just uninhabitable for weeks. But I think there was a lot of confusion and communication afterwards. There were a lot of, this was an unprecedented storm for parts of the United States. Well, I would say for the entire country, really. But it didn't stall. It's not like it wasn't well forecast. It's not like it wasn't moving. It was almost like a series of
unfortunate
worst
events.
Case scenarios that played out for the city of New Orleans and Mississippi at that. And it cost us big time, not only in loss of life. We had over 1,300 people die in that storm, in and after that storm, but also costs of damage, accounting for inflation of the 2024 numbers. This was a $200 billion storm for the United States. So Katrina goes into the record books as the highest storm surge, in addition to the most expensive, the costliest hurricane we've ever seen here in the United States. Wow. Yeah, very, very impressive. Just a couple of the storm surge notes. Most recently, 2022, Hurricane Ian slammed into the west coast of Florida. The storm surge measure there was 10 to 15 feet, which is also, you think about the ocean just coming up 15 feet.
And your whole body is gone. You're
underwater. If you're on the coastline when that happens, you're not on the coastline anymore. Laura in Hurricane Laura of 2020, this is one that hit southwest Louisiana, Category 4 storm, 12 to 18 feet ocean rise. Hurricane Michael, which was the last Category 5 to hit the United States. Obviously, Jamaica, not the United States. So Hurricane Michael still to this day, the last Cat 5 for the U.S., 9 to 14 feet storm surge in the Florida Panhandle. And then Hurricane Ida in 2021 had a 9 to 14 feet storm surge there, which, those totals, they're numbers. But as a meteorologist, you think about the fact that if the ocean's coming up 2 stories high,
It's a bad storm.
Yeah, because you think about, we tell people get to the highest point in your house. Well, a lot
Nobody
of us don't have
has-
3-story homes. We have 2-story homes. And so you think about 2-story home being flooded. It's scary to think about. But then just a couple more here. Hurricane Milton, this is last year. So if it rings a bell, it's a pretty fresh storm. The fastest intensification, Hurricane Milton, which hit Florida. This storm, I remember tracking it because I thought there was an error in the data.
Mm-hmm.
It went from a tropical depression, 35 mile per hour winds, to a Category 5 storm, 160 mile per hour winds in less than 49 hours. So basically in 2 days, this went from a messy area of organized thunderstorms to a Category 5 hurricane just off the coast.
I remember the chatter here in the station about how quickly it changed and how strong it got so fast.
Right.
And, that's just really scary.
Yeah, the 2024 season, in my opinion, is defined by Hurricane Helene. That was the one that made landfall in the Florida Panhandle.
Yeah.
And then Hurricane Milton,
Right after.
which, got close. It made a little bit more of a easterly turn to West Florida. It didn't make it to the Panhandle. It hit the Florida Peninsula. But, I mean, that is insane intensification. We talk about rapid intensification on TV, and by definition, that's a 35 mile per hour jump in 24 hours. So this, I mean, easily exceeded the criteria for rapid intensification. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more of those storms with climate change rapidly intensified. That's exactly what Hurricane Melissa did. Hurricane Melissa rapidly intensified and became the monster of that Category 5 storm.
And is it truly a result of that climate change that we're
It's
experiencing?
a part. You can't necessarily contribute, a storm directly to climate change. The climate change didn't cause Hurricane Melissa. What climate change did was add fuel to the fire.
Make it grow faster.
It's not that climate change is causing more of these hurricanes. It's just, we know with climate change, we see warmer waters. We see, warmer air holds more moisture. So for warming up the environment, warming up the waters, you've got all the ingredients, right? It's just like adding gas to the fire and
Feeding
fuel to the fire.
storm, yeah.
And unfortunately, those storms are becoming more and more intense, and they're becoming more and more intense quickly. And I think that's where we get concerned. Is it's one thing if there's a Category 5 out in the middle of the ocean. I mean, this is our 3rd so far this season. Hurricane Emily, Umberto, and Melissa, Category 5 storms, but it matters when it makes landfall because,
like Melissa,
some people, and unfortunately, if I'm saying there's a tropical storm going to make landfall in Texas on Wednesday, I think a lot of people would stay. They wouldn't evacuate. If I say there's a Category 5 storm about to hit Texas, you're going to get, I think, more of a response and evacuation. So if these storms are tropical storm, until they're 100 miles off the coast and they rapidly intensify, now all of a sudden you got a Category 5 and people are like, wait, what? And then there's that last minute evacuation to go. Then it creates more chaos and hecticness and trying to evacuate from the storm. That's the problem with rapid intensification is it catches people off guard because they see a tropical storm and they go off and they think, I got this. And then by the time it reaches them, it's not a tropical storm anymore.
Yeah.
We saw that a lot in 2020. And that brings us to our next one, that most active hurricane season on record, 2020.
We got all those names off the list.
Yep, we had 30 named storms, 14 of them becoming hurricanes, 17 major hurricanes, which by definition is Category 3 or stronger. But 2020 definitely kept us on our feet. I want to say there were 11 landfalling storms here.
We had to add names, right, in this hurricane season?
So there is always a secondary list of names in case we run out. So back in 2020, we used the Greek alphabet once we exhausted the 21 names on the list. Now in 2025, we don't use the Greek alphabet. There's a secondary set of actual names that we would use. But in 2020, we'd use the Greek alphabet and we got all the way to iota. But, one of the things we found during 2020 in using these Greek names was some of them sound very familiar, right? Mm-hmm. When you're talking about zeta, eta, and theta.
Because we tap into those names quite frequently when it's hurricane season, right?
Well, it's interesting. I want to say we've done it twice, maybe 3 times gotten into the Greek alphabet. It does not happen a lot. I mean, to think that you had 30 storms develop is wild. So because we don't use the Greek alphabet before we change, because we don't use the Greek alphabet. In fact, we've never gotten so far into the Greek alphabet before 2020. I don't think we realized that the communication would be tough when you talked about tropical storm zeta, tropical storm eta, tropical storm theta. Like they all sound so same. Sound so familiar or similar, I should say, that I think it kind of blurred the messaging a little bit. And the whole point of giving names to hurricanes and tropical storms is to not do that. It's to make it easy. To differentiate the storms. And so I think that led to the secondary list of names being implemented, but
to avoid tapping into that.
Yeah, to not go into the Greek alphabet. And it is a little bit more foreign for us here in the United States, right? But 2020 got all the way to iota with that 30 named storm benchmark, which I mean, that total is crazy to me. Like I said, the fact that 14 of them became hurricanes is wild. 7 of them major hurricanes. Laura was a big one in 2020. I mean, we talked about Laura there with the storm surge that hit Southwest Louisiana. Delta was the one that I was deployed to in Southwest Louisiana. Came 6 weeks, almost to the day, 6 weeks after Laura, and came right on shore, almost the same spot as Laura did. So you think about the fact that a month before they got devastated by a Category 4 storm.
And then they got hit right
6 weeks later, a Category 2 hurricane taking almost the exact path up through Southwest Louisiana. If I remember correctly, Southwest Louisiana, so Lake Charles area, was in the cone of uncertainty 6 times in the 2020 season, which is like, ugh, you feel for them, the storm fatigue of that, I think would be enough to put me over the edge,
constantly being prepared to leave.
For sure. That's exactly right. At that point, you're not even taking down the boards on your windows because you're thinking, well, I'm just going to have to put them back up again, put those hurricane shutters back up again. And so
it's a norm for them at that point.
Yeah. In Hurricane Laura, there was a little piece of that did affect Beaumont in East Texas, Southeast Texas. But it was a doozy of a season. And then I'll finish up with just the Hurricane Melissa. Like I said, the data will become official once NOAA goes through and analyzes everything and make sure there was no like wonky sensors or whatever. But the maximum sustained winds that I saw were that 185 mile per hour sustained winds that we reached yesterday just before landfall, which would tie for the second strongest winds on record. And then that lowest central pressure there that they recorded was the 892 millibars, which would tie for third in that, and that's crazy because you're rivaling some long time records there. Like I said, with Allen 1980. So what's it, 45 years, 45-year record that has stood in these, with hurricanes becoming more explosive with climate change. The fact that even stood so long is impressive. But
how many inches of rainfall did Melissa, or do we know that Melissa has?
We don't know yet. There's a lot that unfortunately cannot be done until the storm moves further away. This morning, we still had tropical storm warnings out for Jamaica. I think right now in that post 24 hours after a storm makes landfall, it's all about recovery, finding the people who need help. And so that's kind of the focus right now, is getting search and rescue teams to Jamaica, finding those who stayed, finding those survivors. And not only in Jamaica, but I mean, this storm came ashore overnight in Cuba as a Category 3 hurricane. Now they did evacuate thousands of people outside of, I know even this morning, they were saying over 1,000, and I know close to 1,000 alone were evacuated out of Guantanamo, the naval base that we've got in Cuba. So that number, I'm sure, is much bigger than we even realize, which is good. We want people to get out of the way of these storms. But Melissa, I think, will definitely at least make top 5, strongest winds, lowest pressure. We won't know anything about rainfall or storm surge yet, but those numbers will come eventually.
Do you think, what place do you think Melissa will land in when it comes to destruction, or like the most destructive hurricane?
You know, it'll be interesting because I don't necessarily know a lot about the infrastructure in Jamaica. From what I've seen from photos and videos, it's not like the United States, right? Now, obviously, some of those resorts are very, very wealthy, and there's probably going to be a lot of money tied in there. But Katrina was so bad and so costly because it wasn't just a one-day deal. I mean, this was days that people, you know, were not in their homes or were on top of their roof or in the Superdome, and it just inundated over 80% of the city of New Orleans was at one point underwater, which is crazy to think. So it was so much more widespread. Jamaica, obviously not that big of an island, and that's part of the draw to it, is it's paradise out in the Caribbean. I think what'll be interesting for me is to see, you know, I unfortunately think that there will be a climb in the death count, and there will be people who got hurt in the storm, but it was very well forecasted. I mean, we knew a week ago that Jamaica would be impacted, and sometimes that's the difference between, you know, seeing a lot of fatalities and just a handful. Now, one person dying in a storm is one too many for us. Like, we want 0 for that number, but because the National Hurricane Center did such a good job forecasting this storm, I'm hoping that people heeded those warnings. They took the preparation seriously, and we can get out of this with, you know, a 100%, you know, those who stayed survived. We already know that 7 people, there were some in Haiti, some in the Dominican Republic, and even some in Jamaica already who were accounted for who did not make it. But our forecasting has come so far, our technology has come so far that you just hope that people listened.
Yeah, we do. We hope that everyone listened and everyone left when they were told to leave originally.
Yeah.
So these are a lot of storms, but and like I mentioned at the top of the show, hurricane season's not over.
Right.
Do you expect us to see more hurricanes before then?
You know, we don't have anything out there now, but we still have a month left, and we have seen November storms before. So I don't, at this point, I've been doing this long enough to never rule anything out.
Yeah.
It's just, we take it day by day, week by week, and right now there's nothing out there for that.
Yeah. Well, we do have your article that you wrote on our website here about these hurricanes, and the photos that you added here are amazing. These were taken from space, right?
Yep. All of those are satellite, courtesy of NOAA and obviously their partnership with NASA. Obviously that one and Alan, that was back in
Black
1980.
and white.
Yeah. So we've come even a little farther with our imagery when it comes to satellites, that being Harvey there. And that's a picture I show even at my school visits because I think it's so impressive. Katrina, that one looks a little more color modified to me, but you can clearly see the eye from space there, and that would be Melissa.
And this looks like...
Or that's Milton, sorry. Milton.
This looks like water.
Yeah, so Florida would be on the right. And up top would be
Florida's here.
Yep.
Louisiana. Wow, that's a big storm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so all those photos there, and all the records that we talked about today, that's Melissa there on the bottom. So
What's this?
So from satellite, you can see like light pollution. So underneath there would be light pollution, or let me see if I can. Yeah, sometimes if it's dark enough, you can see lightning, but that shouldn't be lightning out there. That should probably be
like
Dominican Republic.
So these are all the lights on at night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Interesting. Well, this article is on our website, KXAN.com, for anybody who wants to go back and read up on all of the different storms that we just talked about. Kristen, thank you so much for sharing all of this information with us. It's so fun to read and learn about the history of our hurricanes because they happen every year.
Yes.
We need to learn about them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think coming up later today, Chief Meteorologist Nick Bann is doing a little bit on fall foliage, if I remember correctly. So we're getting to the time of year, still a little bit to watch for hurricane season, getting into the falling leaves and the colors changing, and hopefully some colder temperatures.
Oh, I did have a question I wanted to ask you
Yes.
because you were talking about Melissa not fully over with. Usually after storms or after tropical storms, we get like patches of rainfall around different areas. Are we going to see anything like that from
Not in
this?
the U.S. No, this will go out towards the Northeast. Let me take that back. Not in the continental U.S. Bermuda might get a little bit of this storm Friday, so 2 days from now. But this will not impact Florida. This will not impact the eastern seaboard with direct impacts. Maybe a little bit of some rough surf and rip current threats, but we won't get any rainfall for the lower 48 out of Melissa.
Oh, dang it. I wanted some rain.
I know, girl. Not this time.
Well, thank you, Kristen, and we'll see you next week.
See you then.